Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, if I can get your attention, just before we get started, first of all, thank you for coming and attending our luncheon and AGM today. Just a reminder, if you haven't seen them, there are just outside the emergency exit here, and to your left there are washrooms. And of course, if we do need to exit the building, our exit, we have an emergency exit straight outside, and our muster point is just in front of the bar next door, the red zone. And we're not asking you to go in, just wait outside until we get further instructions. So we do have a number of folks. I just want to point out special guests. We do have the board from WCB, Gord, Larry, and Gary. Do you want to wave, please? Great. We have Jeff from the Apprenticeship and Commission, Carolyn Bagnall from Mechanical Contractors Association. I thought I saw Ray Anthony at the back from Labor Relations Workplace Safety, Executive Director there, May Smith. And I'm sorry, we haven't met. Donna John, you're the new, okay, the new Deputy Minister for Labor Relations Workplace Safety, Donna Johnson. Thank you. I was just talking about you, but I hadn't a chance to meet you, so thank you for coming. And I hope there isn't anyone that I've missed. Kevin Mooney, whose back is facing us, who's from WCB as well. So again, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Peter Federko, current Chief Executive Officer of WCB. For the last, since I've been with the association, we've had an opportunity to have a speaker come to each one of these events, and so it's really great to have Peter. He's after 24 years, will be retiring at the end of May this year, and so he's wondering what he's going to do with all of his time. So if you have any backyard projects or anything like that, I'm pretty sure he'll be available. And so anyways, it's great to have you. Thank you. He's got some great words to share, and I'll hand this off to you. So thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
All right.
You should have everything ready there. Are you good? Good afternoon, everyone. So I don't usually get too apprehensive about events like this, but when notice of the AGM, when Colin sent me an email and said we'd like you to speak at our AGM, wondering if you're available, I said sure, and then the next thing I know, a notice comes out and he's pegged me as the keynote speaker, whatever the hell that means. And then he just sets me up to say, that I'm going to have some wonderful words of inspiration for you today. I'm not sure that I will or not. First thing I need to do, though, however, is tell you, it's like the disclaimer that the announcers on the radio say, that the views expressed today are simply the views of the presenter and not necessarily those of my board. I understand they have to rush off to a hearing this afternoon, so it's probably best that they don't have to stay for the rest of it. And if you do get up early, I'll know that I have offended you, but what are you going to do? So I thought I'd share a little bit with you here today. You're going to see all kinds of graphs and numbers and whatever, and you know the old saying, if you can't dazzle with brilliance, you should baffle them with statistics. But I thought I'd take a little stroll back, kind of a little bit down memory lane, and just talk a little bit about where we've been as an organization and you as an industry, where we currently are at, and kind of what I ruminated about in terms of what I think some of the future issues and challenges might be for you as an industry, as well as the workers' compensation system as the workplace insurer in this province. So I showed up here in 1994 not knowing anything about workers' comp, and quite frankly not caring to. and somehow I was convinced that this would be a good career move for me, and I guess 24 plus years later, they in fact were right and I was wrong. So I show up here and there are all kinds of issues going on, all kinds of challenges that the organization was facing, that the system was facing. And so I was initially hired as the chief financial officer, so of course I'm looking at numbers and costs and all these kinds of things. And back in 1994, our total compensation costs were about $81 million. By 1996, those costs had grown to $114 million. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on with respect to these costs, what might be driving the compensation costs. And so I assembled a group of kind of experts within our organization and say, okay, typically, in your experience, what would be kind of the key factors that would drive, compensation costs? And, no kind of big surprise, I guess, but they said that the top three things that would drive compensation costs would be claim durations, the length of time that someone stays on workers' compensation, and of course the frequency of injury, how many claims you actually do receive and have to pay. And the third thing would be what the average wage base is. So what's the average earnings of the individuals that are being injured and that you are insuring? I know our friends from LRWRS are here, and so again, if I do offend you, I suppose I apologize, but this is actually the way that it was. So workers' compensation did not and currently does not legally have a mandate for health and safety. And so when I approached occupational health and safety in the day and said, we're really seeing claims starting to increase here, and we'd kind of like to work together to see what we could do to try and reduce those incidents. I was basically told to go mind my own business, that the responsibility for health and safety resided in the ministry, and thank you very much. We'll call you if we need you. And so I thought, well, okay, we'll chip away a little bit at that, but let's look at what's going on with the duration numbers themselves. So this should be something that we do have somewhat influence, if not control over, in terms of influencing the length of time that people would be on compensation. In February of 1994, the government passed new legislation that had several changes to it. One of the significant changes that impacted our organization was they took away the board's medical officers' ability to influence readiness for work. And so, being honest with you, our medical officers were, I would say, abusing the authority that they had within the legislation. They were very much relying on, they back in the day, you can tell how professional we were, we called it the meat chart. So they were basically looking at standard recovery times as dictated by somebody somewhere in the world. Oh, you have a soft tissue injury, the recovery guides say you should have recovered within 6 months. Therefore, 6 months is up and your benefits will end. Oh, you have this, you should recover in 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, benefits ended, whether there was actually, in fact, recovery or return to work or not. And so the government of the day decided to remove that power that our medical officers had to influence the readiness for work and put that in the hands of the outside caregivers, which created a whole bunch of issues for us. Because now we had practitioners who were saying to us, our primary responsibility, we really appreciate all the challenges that you might have, but our primary responsibility is to be advocate for the patient. And so we have no obligation on our part to tell you anything about the medical condition of the individual or their readiness for work, and so good luck to you. So we hired a couple of folks, one of them a past CEO of the City Hospital in Regina, and we struck a little project that we called the Early Intervention Project. Struck a committee made up of caregivers, and I spent a lot of time on the road meeting with the medical associations, chiros, physios, doctors, and working out a protocol in terms of how they could provide us the information that we needed to determine readiness for work and yet discharge their responsibilities as primary patient advocates. And, that worked pretty well. So what do you, if you can go back and just to the duration. So looking at the duration slide, and this is just, again, just a walk back in time. I wouldn't, if you see that spike in 2006, I think it is. I can talk pretty loud, so this one right here. I know Colin wants to record this, so I wouldn't worry too much about that spike. It wasn't that anything dramatically happened that caused people to suddenly stay on longer. Really what happened was we changed the definition of how we were calculating average durations. So prior to that, to 2006, average durations were calculated based on the average number of days paid for new claims in the system, time loss claims registered in the year. We switched that because what we were ignoring were older claims perhaps that were stuck, that needed some sort of intervention in order to get them back into the workplace. And so the definition changed where now our average durations are actually determined by the average number of days on all time loss claims paid within that year, regardless of the actual year of injury. And the numbers themselves aren't important, but I guess what I wanted to kind of draw to your attention here is the trend. And so if we ignore that spike in 2006 that arose because of the change in the way that we actually calculated this, our durations have been on a somewhat steady trend in terms of increasing. If we look at just the last 5 years, and I focus just in on the B codes, we've seen an increase in each. So you see 3 codes up there, B11, B12, and B13. I should, I guess, probably tell you what those are. B11 are the building trades. B12 is essentially residential construction, and B13 is industrial commercial. So I'm not sure if I got the colors right or not, but the red one would be the trades, the gray one would be the residential, and the yellow line would be the industrial commercial. The blue line there is just all industry. So that's the average at the board level. The colored lines, the other colored lines are actually the construction sector as covered by us. Over the last 5 years, we've seen fairly sharp and dramatic increases in the duration of claims within the construction industry, at a minimum increasing by 10 days over the last 5 years. Within B13, within industrial commercial, we've seen the largest increase at 15 days. So on average, within the construction sector, folks are staying on compensation, let's say 10 days longer than they were 5 years ago. Now you'll see the similar trend, although the lines are not as high as perhaps what we're seeing in the sector. You know what's interesting, if we look at the trades, and from that period of like 2006 to, I don't know what that is, 2012 maybe, the trades durations were actually below the average for all industries within WCB. And then, took that turn up and have been on that same upward progression as what we're seeing in the other industry codes. As we analyze and see what's going on with respect to the general increase in trends across all industries as it relates to durations, the underlying cause appears to be increasing severity of the injury, and I'm going to come back to that just in a few minutes. So as time progressed, with the increase in claims costs, the increase in injury frequency, we kept working with our friends over at the ministry, and when 2002 hit, 2000 I guess, we saw sharp increases in the frequency of injury, and at that time my board decided that, notwithstanding whether we had legal responsibility for OH&S or not, they would build into our vision statement responsibility for workers' compensation to work with industry to actually reduce injuries. So we accepted a mandate for injury prevention. Went over to the ministry, and the minister of the day determined that yes, in fact, there ought to be a relationship between the WCB and OH&S to drive a provincial prevention strategy. And so in 2002, we formally launched this partnership that we call WorkSafe Saskatchewan, which is a partnership between the LRWS and the WCB. I would say it was a very loose partnership because both sides were very cautious. The regulator did not want to give up any responsibility with respect to the regulatory authority. And so when it came to trying to develop a provincial strategy for injury reduction, it became still difficult for us to do until 2008, when we actually entered into a formal memorandum of understanding and began working together to actually plan and coordinate our activities. So if we actually look at what's happened with respect to claims, and the next slide, please. So you'll see that, and if I took you all the way back to 2002 when we spiked in terms of our claims, we have been on a constant decline in terms of total claims within the system. Back in 1994, when I first started, there were almost 35,000 claims being reported to us. In 1998, that number dropped to just over 31,000, almost 32,000. At the end of 2018, we were down to just over 22,000 claims. So a reduction of 12,000 claims since 1994. Over the last 20 years, a reduction of over 12,000 claims that have come into the system. If I look at the industries within the construction industry, you'll see similar trends, a few blips in terms of increases in particularly the commercial and industrial over that short period of time, but consistent trend in terms of decreasing number of claims. Over the last 5 years, at the overall board level, we have seen just under a 20% decrease in total claims. However, in 2018, we saw uptick in total claims of about 130 claims. When I look at the three sectors within the construction industry, every sector is actually down in terms of total claims. The trades are down by about 400, residential's down by just over 480, and commercial industrial is down by about 600 claims. When I look at what's happened in 2018, again, every one of the industry sectors, if you look at the red, yellow, and gray lines, you'll see that when we compare 2017 to 2018, your industry has been more successful than we have at the overall board level in terms of reducing the number of total claims. Next slide, please. These are the claims that really end up costing you the money. These are the time loss claims. Time loss claim is a claim that's serious enough to cause the worker to stay out of the workforce for at least the day of beyond the day of injury, at least 1 day beyond the day of injury. A very similar trajectory in terms of what's happening with respect to our time loss claims. Again, when we spiked in 2002, we've seen significant reductions year over year with respect to time loss claims. In 1994, when I started, there were 12,600 time loss claims. 98, that dropped down to, actually went up to about 13,000 claims. In 2018, that's down to just over 8,100 time loss claims. Very significant reduction. Now, what does that mean from, let's say, an economic perspective? So between 1994 and 2018, there's 4,464 fewer time loss claims. An average cost of a time loss claim is $10,000. That means that over $44 million in compensation costs have been removed from the system as a result of your injury prevention efforts and the reduction in time loss claims. Over the last 5 years, We've seen a reduction at the board level of almost 1,600 claims, so that's $16 million over the last 5 years. Within the B sectors, again, we've seen reductions in every one of the B codes over the last 5 years. Minimum saving within the B codes as a result of your injury reduction efforts is about $1.5 million per year. 2018, we actually saw an uptick in the number of claims. We're up about 260 time loss claims at the board level. Similar to what we saw at the total claim level, you'll see that the time loss claims within the construction sector actually decreased. Now, one of the indicators, next slide, Jenna. One of the indicators that we share with you all the time is our injury rates. So we don't often just talk about total claims or time loss claims. We actually convert that into a percentage so we can actually have a sense of the relative safety of a workplace. And as the injury rates are simply a percentage of either total claims. If we're measuring the total injury rate, it's the total claims divided by our estimate of full-time equivalents. If it's time loss claims, it's the number of time loss claims divided by our estimate of full-time equivalents. As you probably know, we don't get number of employees reported to us, we only get payroll reported to us. And through a calculation using the average weekly age as published by Stats Canada, we estimate the number of full-time equivalents that we are covering. There is not necessarily a correlation between the number of people working in our province and the number of full-time equivalents, because it's based on a calculation of simply average weekly wage and total payroll. So if we've seen slower growth in wages within industry below the rate with which the average weekly wage is increasing, just simply through mathematics, the number of full-time equivalents will actually go down. You may have exactly the same number of people working. Your payroll may be shrinking because people aren't working as many hours. You're not paying overtime because there just isn't as much work. And so the payroll you're reporting to us will go down, which will cause our calculation of full-time equivalents to go down, even though you may have exactly the same number of people that are working within your industry. What's interesting looking at the payroll number is look at the massive growth in payroll across the piece. Now, I couldn't get a breakdown of payroll between B11, 12, and 13 for the entire period here, so I've just grouped all of the B codes in here. But look at the tremendous growth in payroll over that period of time. You know, at the board level, we've seen payroll from 1998, so the last 20 years, it grew from about $8.5 billion to over $22 billion, 163% increase. Within the construction sector, when I look at all three B codes combined over that same 20-year period, you grew from $384 million in 1998 to $1.7 billion in 2018, a 343% increase, which has translated into a huge increase in the number of full-time equivalents. Looking at over the last 5 years, within the construction industry, we're not seeing the similar trends. We continue to see industry overall increase, payroll increase by about $2 billion over the last 5 years at the board level. However, within the construction sector, in all three categories, trades, residential, and commercial, we've seen decreases in the between 11% at the trade level to 31% at the industrial commercial level in terms of payrolls. Correspondingly, the full-time equivalents within the industry sector have been calculated to decrease. The most dramatic decrease that we've seen over the last 5 years has been in industrial commercial, a reduction of about 6,000 full-time equivalents over that period of time, which I think is quite significant. So how does this all play in? Well, I'm going to show you the injury rates now. So we look at the rate of injury, and now these are total injuries. Just absolutely outstanding improvement in terms of the rate of injury, and a measure of the relative safety of workplaces in Saskatchewan today compared to where we were 20 years ago. And that's true across the board piece. You'll see at one point, is that 2016 there? Industrial commercial total injury rate was actually below the average for the entire province. And now we've seen a slight uptick at all levels. So we've seen an increase in the rate of injury, driven partially, so in the construction sector, remember I told you earlier, your total claims are actually down in 2018. But because of the reduction in your full-time equivalents, the rate of injury is increasing. Whether that's true or not, we can't say, because we actually don't know how many people are working in the construction industry. But the important thing is in relative terms, because this indicator has been consistent across the last 24 years. What we're seeing across many of the industries, including construction, is a 1 year in a row uptick of the rate of injury within our province, which I guess it's an alert. I'm not sure it's an alarm, but it's an alert for us not to ever take our eye off the ball here, I guess. And I'm certainly not suggesting that complacency has set in, but it could be for a variety of factors. We've simply paid a little bit less attention in terms of the aggressiveness with which we are pursuing reduction of injuries. If we look at the time loss injury rate, which is the next slide, Jen, very, very similar trend. Huge reductions in the injury rate. When this spiked at the board level in 2002, we were at 4.95%. We're at 1.99%. So instead of 5 out of every worker is experiencing an injury serious enough to take them out of the workforce, less than 2 per 100 are actually seeing that effect. Very similar trends. Again, look at industrial commercial, the yellow line there. For a few years there, you actually fell below the overall average rate of injury for time loss claims in our province. Tremendous progress, removing a significant number of time loss claims and removing a significant amount of compensation days simply because there's fewer claims being paid and dollars associated with that. Next slide, please, Jenna. The result you see within your premium rates. So I had a little bit of fun with this. I actually went back into 1994. In 1994, I remember this, there were actually 5 industry rate codes within the construction sector. There was 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. 14 was a hodgepodge of trades and a bunch of other stuff. It was basically sectors that no other construction sector wanted to be a part of. And B15 actually had the roofers in it, and no one really wanted to be associated with the roofers. Sorry, Flynn. The premium rates in 1994, so for the B15 code, which was primarily the roofers, they were paying $12.60 per $100 of payroll. B11, which was a bit of a hybrid of trades, was paying $5.25. Residential was paying $6.30. Commercial industrial was paying $8.65. Contrast that to the 2018 premium rates. Trades paying $1.52 per 100, residential paying $2.55, and industrial commercial paying $1.91. Does injury prevention pay? I think the return, just in economic terms, is pretty obvious. I don't know what that means to you in terms of your pocketbook. The fact of the matter is you might actually be writing me a bigger check today than you were back in 1994 because you've seen your payroll grow 340%. But the rate per 100, your cost of insurance, has decreased in some cases by like 800%. I think that investment in health and safety and injury prevention has not only the economic benefits that show up through the reductions in the premium rates, but think about it. Over 12,000 people today, over 12,000 families today do not have to deal with the consequences of a workplace injury. Life for everyone should be considered to be somewhat better. Next slide, please. I don't know what this one is. The sad one. Unlike progress that we've jointly been able to achieve with respect to the reduction in injuries, we have not been able to have that same impact on fatalities. So these are the fatalities. The blue line is what we're seeing at the overall board level. And again, you'll see the red being trades, 12 being residential, 13 industrial commercial. You'll see the fatalities within the construction industry over this period of time. Over the last 5 years, we've seen 33 fatalities in the construction sector. With the exception of 2017, where there were 0 fatalities in B11, every industry sector within the construction industry had at least 1 fatality over the last 5 years. Number 1 cause of fatalities? You guys probably heard this in the news. Occupational disease. Of the 33 fatalities, 16 of those over the last 5 years, 16 of those were occupational disease related. 15 asbestos. I've had people come up to me and say, I don't know why you even talk to us about these asbestos claims. What are we supposed to do about this? These are exposures that had happened 20, 25 years ago that are now just coming to fruition and industries being held responsible for it. The reality is, and you will know this better than I do, the residential, industrial, commercial buildings that we have in this province, many of them continue to contain asbestos, and you have folks going into those buildings on a daily basis, whether they're doing maintenance or renovations or expansions or demolitions, and could be very well exposed to asbestos fibers. And so we, through WorkSafe, embarked on a bit of an awareness campaign to help create some awareness among you, the construction industry, and this has been done in partnership with the great folks at SCSA, as well as homeowners, about the risks associated with, opening up walls in buildings that may in fact contain asbestos fibers. So notwithstanding that what we're seeing today in terms of deaths from these exposures are well beyond our control, what happens to the generations that come is clearly within our control. The next most prevalent cause of fatalities within the construction sector are traumatic injuries. And that's everything from, being run over by a forklift to falling off buildings. Certainly, something that we can do about each and every one of those. When I looked at the cause of injury, next slide, please. Look at the cause of injury. So this is just within the construction sector, and it's 3 different causes. The blue line, I think, says being struck by an object. The second one is contact with equipment. And the third one, the gray one, are falls. And I guess what I wanted to bring to your attention here is if you look at that gray line in particular, so these are falls from heights. And you look at where we were at, where does that start, Colin? What year is that actually starting? Look, 20 years ago, where we were at in terms of the incidence of falls within the construction sector, compare that to where we're at in 2018. We're actually higher. What impact have we actually had in terms of reducing the falls from heights that are occurring within the construction sector? Is our PPE any better today than it was 20 years ago? I hope the hell it is. So what's the deal? Contrast that to what we've been able to do. I think the red line, if I'm reading that right, sorry, the red line is bodily reaction. So that's exertions. That's back strains or, pounding nails or something causing repetitive strain injuries or whatever. We've actually been able to impact that, particularly over the last 5 years. We've been able to impact the blue line, getting hit on the head by something falling object. We've improved our ability through hard hats and other PPE and perhaps education and training and perhaps some enforcement to impact that. But how come we can't do anything about that fall? Because the challenge I throw out to us jointly is what can we do in the coming days, months, and years to actually have a larger impact in terms of reducing the most common cause of injury within your industry. Wrapping up, what do I think is in front of us? I already talked about asbestos exposures. I think without our continued due diligence in this area, we will continue to see asbestos fatalities come through the doors. And some of these will be new exposures. I think we need to narrow our focus in terms of trying to reduce all injuries by focusing on serious injuries. Research that's been done internationally shows us, they have proven that if you focus on the reduction of serious injuries and fatalities, you actually impact the total number of injuries. And if you think about it, and what we define as serious injury, I think there are 5 kind of criteria. So they're on comp for more than X number of days. It's a psychological injury. It's a fatality. Those are all fall into kind of that serious injury category. But if you think about it, if a back injury turns into a long-term claim, it'll be categorized as a serious injury. If we focus on what can we do to reduce the incidence of those serious injuries, not only will we impact the serious back injuries, we'll impact all back injuries. And so I think our focus certainly at WCB and WorkSafe for 2019 is to focus on the reduction of serious injuries and fatalities. Within the construction sector, as I already pointed out, I think we need to renew our focus on what the hell's going on with falls. I'm not sure that Donna can hire enough inspectors to ensure that everybody on every roof and every building is actually wearing their PPE. So how do we as partners work jointly together to ensure that proper supervision, training, whatever is required, supplemented and supported by the enforcement and educational efforts that WorkSafe can bring to the table, can actually have a greater positive impact on this. Psychological injury claims. Since 2013, we've seen a 79% increase in the number of psychological injury claims filed with us. Still a very small percentage of our overall claims. Last year, 2018, we had just over 29,000 claims. Only 670 of those were psychological injury claims. But that's a 79% increase. The cost of those claims, 2013, were about $3.5 million. They're more than double that today. Why is this an issue for the construction industry? Come on, we know the kind of people. It's not very macho to actually admit that I might be struggling from some psychological condition. And whether that psychological condition is caused by repeated traumas or a single traumatic event that they've experienced at work or something else going on in their life, we as employers accept those workers the way they are when they come in the door. And if we can't recognize the signs of psychological injury claims early and get the interventions in place to prevent those people from losing work, we will lose productivity. And then costing, in the case of workers' comp, workplace psychological injuries, costing industry dollars as a result of paying those for psychological injuries, or causing our economy to invest more heavily. Just yesterday in the provincial budget, you heard the increase in funding that the provincial government is putting toward, I think the majority of it going to the North Battleford Hospital, but to address the psychological injury. I think the next epidemic coming is psychological injury claims. They will be the next asbestos of our future. I'd like us to think about the use of predictive analytics. What can we learn by maybe drawing on bigger data that others have? We ran a little experiment a couple of years ago. ISM helped us by looking at weather conditions and the conditions that might impact slips, trips, and falls. What do you suppose our hypothesis was going into this? It would have a lot to do, our hypothesis was it would have a lot to do with ice and snow. Wrong. Big data showed us, and this should be of interest to the construction industry, big data showed us it was wind that was the primary correlator between slips, trips, and falls, including falls from heights. What else can we learn by looking beyond the borders of Saskatchewan, by looking at data that exists outside of our systems so that we can better predict when injuries might occur and what interventions we can put in place to prevent those injuries? My impression, and I think what might be going on in terms of what we're seeing in terms of increased durations, so we introduced Mission Zero in 2008. Since 2002, really, when we started our WorkSafe partnership, we were all about injury prevention. Mission Zero put even a finer focus on the reduction of injuries. And I think that's distracted us a little bit from the important role that we play in terms of restoring people's abilities. The mandate of the safety associations back when we redid the funding agreements in 1996 was to include both injury prevention and return to work. We're to assist members of our industry to get better at preventing injuries, but in the event that an injury occurred, assisting employers to understand how we can quickly bring them back into the workplace, helping them design return to work programs and policies. And I fear that we may have just been let the pendulum swing a little bit too far toward the injury prevention side and lost a little bit of focus on the restorabilities or return to work. And when we think about return to work, I have a new perspective on this, and I'm going to share with you a personal experience of mine. Just over a year ago, I got one of our vehicles stuck in a snowbank. Being the farm boy that I am, no need to call a tow truck or do anything else. I'm just going to push this vehicle out of this snowbank. The vehicle was hung up, so it required me to lift and push. And on the very first lift and push, I heard this pop, and I went down on my knees. I'd fractured my L1 vertebrae. It wasn't work-related, so no real impacts on workers' compensation. But what I want to talk to you about is the impact that had on me and my family. So I was restricted from doing anything up until about 4 months ago. I was in a hard shell body or back brace for about 4.5 months. I couldn't lift anything. I couldn't carry anything. There wasn't really much of anything I could do. Everything that was required, grocery shopping, changing of light bulbs, whatever the case may be, fell on my wife and my kids. I spent about 2 weeks at home, sitting on the couch waiting. It took me 4 weeks to see a specialist to actually figure out what they were going to do with me. But I spent over 2 weeks at home, moving from couch to chair to bed to whatever, and wondering what the hell is going to happen to me. And I could feel myself become depressed. And if it weren't for the constant contact by my employer, who contacted me daily to see how I was doing, and the fact that I have a job I can do, I sit on my butt all day. So, it's not like I got a lift or do anything for work. I could actually go back to work as soon as, they told me I'm not going to hurt myself any longer by doing kind of normal stuff or whatever. But the impact on the individual, and I know more now than I knew before, that the psychological impact of the injury can have as big an influence on the individual's recovery as treating the physical injury itself. And so as we think about restoration of abilities and return to work, if we truly value our employees, if we truly care about their well-being and getting them back into productive employment, we don't just worry about the recovery from their physical ailment. We pay attention to their psychological well-being, which we now have learned is a barrier when it comes to recovery of the physical injury itself. We've created 4 personas of high-risk types of workers that tend to persist on workers' comp longer than others. Construction workers between the age of 35 and 50 fall within one of our high-risk personas. So I caution you as an industry, be ever so diligent, and as we learn more about, as we experiment with these personas and confirm that we can apply interventions early to get these people's abilities restored quicker and back into the workplace, we'll be sharing that with industry so you can apply those risk factors as well. Lastly, we really need to work together to continue to maintain the integrity of our system. This is your system that we have been honored to actually administer on your behalf. And we do it to ensure that we work together to continue to maintain the integrity of the system. And not let the voices of the vocal minority actually convince you not to do the right things. And what I mean by that is each and every one of us, as partners within the workers' compensation system, have a responsibility to discharge our respective role and responsibility, which includes all the obligations I think we have in terms of injury prevention and return to work. Includes the obligations of, challenging the workers' compensation to improve the services that we can provide and support you in better ways, but also to accept responsibility and accountability for what we, as employers in this province, must do in order to support those systems. The system by no means is perfect. I have had the opportunity to see extensively compensation systems around the world. What we have, with the exception, I would say, of Europe, is probably one of the best compensation systems that I've ever seen. I know many want to challenge the foundational pieces of workers' comp in terms of why aren't employees held more accountable for the injuries that happen within our workplaces? Why is this a no-fault system? Because it actually works. And expeditiously, if you look at the U.S. system, for example, that's highly litigious, we can expeditiously, through a no-fault system, facilitate the decision and restoration of folks' abilities and minimize the economic impact, social impact of injuries on our society and on your workplaces. I have very much appreciated the opportunity to serve you over the last 24 plus years. Most importantly, I value the partnerships and really support. We haven't always agreed on everything that we've ever talked about or discussed. I believe we've always been honest, transparent, straightforward with each other. And I truly have appreciated really the camaraderie and the joint commitment that we together have made and taken to actually improve the relative health and safety of this province. I'm grateful to have been a very, very small part of that fantastic journey that I think you as industry and your employees have been able to facilitate. Thank you very much for this, Colin. I'm not sure if you had any time for any questions, but I'd be happy to take whatever anybody wants to give me. Not promising I can answer them, but
Don't run away yet, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate. I made a few notes here, but I really appreciate you talking about about the business case and the impact and loss of performance and the inefficiencies that we've been working for a long time to try to reduce, to make companies higher performing. And so I appreciate you talking about that. The encouragement to stay focused. What we have both as an organization and things that you and your team have said to me as far as encouraging us. It's a pleasure to work with your teams. And last, I just wish you the best in retirement. Thank you so much. I don't know what that's going to look like for you. You haven't figured that out yet, I know. But again, thank you very much. I have a small gift for you on behalf of our. I'll even give you the bag too, so I'll be. On behalf of our board of directors, thank you very much.
thank you.
I have a really like leadership, and I like giving stuff like this away because it makes people smarter. And so Genesis gave this to me, and I wasn't sure how to take it, but I like to share it with you.
My favorite author?
Yeah. Four obsessions of an extraordinary executive, and so enjoy that. And also have another small gift for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks again. Okay, so we'll be moving to the next part of our agenda here. Ryan said we'll take a 2-minute break before we start the formal part of the meeting. Again, if you do need the washrooms, they're just outside the door here to the right, and then it'll be very, very quick break, and then Ryan will be starting off the business portion of today. Thanks.
Well, we might as well get this going. So one additional person I wanted to introduce that was missed was Nolan Horbeck. He's the program head of OH&S for School of Human Services and Community Safety. So Nolan, put your hand up. Is he in here?
His stuff's here, so he's must have just stepped out.
So when Nolan walks in, does everybody want to clap or something? Just make him feel real welcome. So to get this going, we'll call the meeting to order. A few people I'd like to mention right off the bat and thank them for their efforts over the past year. First of all, my vice chair, Mark Novikowski, as well as the rest of my board, or rest of the SCSA board, Aaron Yonke, Dion Malikoff, and we'll go through the introductions here shortly, so before you guys have to stand up and wave your hand and everything. Mike Skripnik, Keith Bird, Karen Lowe, Dana Pidell, and Errol Fisher. So to get going, I need an adoption of the agenda. So I need to call for a motion to accept and adopt the agenda as presented. If I can get a motion, Dion, thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second Bobby.
Bobby, thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passed. We also need adoption of the minutes from the February 15th, 2018 meeting. I just need call for a motion. Dion, thank you, Dion. Second? Carolyn, thank you very much, Carolyn. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. From what I can tell, 4.0 on the agenda, business arising out of the minutes. There is no existing or additional information arising out of the minutes from last year's meeting. I will comment from last year's meeting though. It's been an interesting year. Last year we did change our board of directors down through the process from our membership from the high 30s on our board. We're now down to when at peak capacity we're at a 12-person board. It's been an interesting year, and I think the efficiencies have definitely become apparent. The engagement from the board members has been, second to none. I appreciate the support that every one of the individuals that are sitting on our board has committed to it, and the participation level has been amazing. One of the people that I do also want to thank, from this or from our board from this year is Melina Gorick, who unfortunately had to step down and is moving on to bigger and better things, moving into a different industry. So I also want to thank Melina, her support and participation within the regional safety committees, as well as on the board, representing herself and the industry and her rate code and the general work or residential workforce very, very well. So thank you very much. 5.0 appointments to the 2019 Board of Directors. The first thing, one of the recommendations of the board was call for a motion to the election, or for the election of Karen Lowe from a board nominated seat to an elected position. So if I can get a call for motion on that.
I'll make that.
Errol Fisher. Call. Second.
I'll second that.
Mark. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen, for coming aboard. So I'd like to introduce the SCSA Board of Directors for 2019. For everyone in attendance, if you don't mind standing, and just remain standing while the names are being called. First, the new chair, as of the end of this meeting, Mark Novikowski. So, introduce Mark to everybody. And the new vice chair, as selected this morning, Keith Bird. He had to leave. So Keith, Aaron Yonke. I'm sorry, I guess I should also mention who they're representing. So Mark's representing general workforce. Keith Bird is representing also general workforce. Oh no, sorry, commercial. Aaron Yonke is representing industrial. Dion Malikoff. So organized workforce. Mike Skripnik, organized labor workforce. Karen Lowe, general workforce. Dana Pidell, industrial. And Karen, did I get everybody? Is that everybody? That is, and myself, I guess. Ryan Smucha, I'm also representing commercial. We have, the governance committee is currently going through selection process for the two residential reps. As mentioned, Melina had to step down, and Errol is also stepping away from the board. So we're in the governance committee is currently in the process of selecting new members. So this is your 2019 Board of Directors. (6.0) The annual report. Karen, you have to head out, so thank you for coming, Karen. Karen also has a flight to catch. Presentation of the annual report. We won't be formally presenting all the reports. The President's report, operations report, advisory committee chairperson report can be found on the annual report for review. So call for a motion to accept chairpersons, presidents, operations, and advisory committee reports. Mike, second. Aaron, thank you very much. All in favor? Motion passed. 7.0, auditor's report and financial statements. This was reviewed through the Finance Committee as well as the Board of Directors this morning. If I could get a call for a motion to accept the 2018 auditor's report and financial statements as presented. Aaron, second. Mark Novkowski, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. And appointment for the 2019 auditor. I'd like to call for a motion to appoint KPMG as the auditor for 2019. If I can get a motion for that. Carolyn?
Second it.
Second is Errol. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. And resolution regarding the acts of officers and directors. I need to call for a motion that all acts and decisions of the officers and directors of the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, SCSA, throughout 2018 be ratified and approved. Somebody make a motion? Elena Gord, second. Dion Malikoff, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you very much.
Sir, board membership can pass motions and motion.
Oh, yeah, Melena, sorry, you can't, you're not membership. So if I could get, if I get somebody else to make the motion for resolution regarding the acts of officers and directors. Mark, second again. Dana, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. You almost slipped that one by me, Melena, thanks. So on to section 10, which is the SCSA annual awards presentation. These awards are given in recognition of a member company, safety practitioner, and regional safety committee's dedication to and outstanding contribution and commitment to safety, leadership, and the SCSA's mission of constructing safety leadership and our vision of the safest construction environment in Canada. This year, we recognize 2 finalists and 1 winner for each category. So the finalists for the Corporate Leadership and Safety Award, we'll start off by calling the 2 finalist companies, Safe and Sound Exteriors and Silverline Construction. If you would like to come up. So, first one is we'll do Safe and Sound. Where do you want to stop the pictures?
Just over here. It's good, just on the left side of the podium.
Right here?
And you can come over here.
Or do you want us in front of the?
No, right here's perfect, and then the award finalists will proceed over to the
Okay.
screen. Ed, just taking the photo. Ed will come up.
That's the,
Sorry.
here, we'll come on this side.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. And our winner for this year, thank you very much. Yeah. I'd like to call upon Asil Enterprises to accept the 2018 Corporate Leadership Award. side?
Yeah.
For this one?
No, right here.
Okay, right
You're
here?
just signing it off, and then they'll go over for a photo.
Oh, sorry. I told you, oh yeah, you're supposed to go over there for the photo.
Okay. Don't mind the heels.
It's my third year, I'll figure it out eventually. Next up, we have the Safety Practitioner Award. Finalists, we'd like to be calling up the two finalists, our two finalists, Jeff Cochran from Asil Enterprises and Andrew Eilers from PCL. You guys want to come on up? Who first?
Do Jeff first, and then you can just have.
So Jeff, well, Jeff first here.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thanks. Thank you.
And then Andrew. Well done, sir. Just proceed over here. And the winner, I'd like to call upon Corey Johnson from Flyer Electric to accept the 2018 Safety Practitioner Award.
Thanks very much.
Proceed over to the third award for the Regional Safety Committee Distinguished Progress Award. We'd like to start off by calling representatives from their two finalist regions, Regina and Prince Albert.
So we have John first.
John, well done.
Thank you.
Hold alma mater.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Maybe just a quick frame.
just, yeah. Okay. All right. And the winner of the Regional Safety Committee Distinguished Progress Award, I'd like to call on the representative from the Swift Current region to accept the 2018 Regional Safety Committee Distinguished Progress Award. Sure. Is it three?
It's all three of us.
Right on.
John,
And thank you to everybody who applied. Appreciate it. We also have a couple other recognitions to hand out here. The Board of Directors service recognition. I'd like to take the time to recognize the directors who are no longer with the SCSA Board for their years of service. And again, recognition for 2 years of service. I'd like to call up Milena Gorick to thank her for her dedication to the board. Milena not only spent time on the board, but was also the Regina Regional Safety Committee chair for a number of years.
Where are you going? Where are you going?
Thanks for all your work, Milena.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to call up Errol Fisher to thank him for his dedication to the board for his 5-year award, recognition for 5 years or more service. I'd also like to personally thank Errol on behalf of myself. Errol has been my past chair and a source of guidance, support, good ideas. He's done an amazing amount for this board. The effort and commitment he's put in for the SCSA and the advancement of safety within the residential industry and within the construction industry as a whole is appreciated by not just myself and the people in this room, but every worker in this province, Errol. And I thank you very much for the commitment that you've put into advancing the safety cause within this province. So thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So as we're getting close to the end of this presentations, you know, there's been a lot of people that last year at the end of the AGM, they stepped back and gave up their positions, changing board. And you know, I'd mentioned a little bit the efficiencies have improved and the participation has improved. Everybody that took time and has given time on the board to support, and again, to support the cause of improving safety within the construction industry, their time's appreciated. We have a number of former board members that are here that are still showing their support towards safety and their commitment. The current board, I'd like to say, you know, just as a really good example of the change that happened. When I first started on this board a number of years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I came to my first AGM with the SCSA, and we could not make quorum with the board of directors that we had at the time at the annual general meeting. That was a situation that we were facing with our board, and you know, stepping down as chair, I'm proud to see the changes I've made. I'm proud to see the commitment that people have made. I'm extremely proud to say at this morning's board meeting, our annual general meeting, and this is the first, truly the first one with our new board structure. We had 100% attendance from the current listed board members at our meeting this morning, and I think that alone for this board and the commitment to the people that are there speaks volumes. It shows the changes that we've made, and I'm excited to see the path that we're on. I'd like to thank the construction industry for giving me the opportunity to take on the role as chair. I hope I did my, you know, hopefully I did the industry, you know, and the people that I was representing as you know, did a good job for them and represented them well. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Do I need to call for a motion to adjourn?
You just adjourn it.
So I'd like to thank everybody for coming in today. Appreciate the attendance, the support, the voting, and you representing your industry and your companies here today. And thank you for the time for joining us. I'd like to ask the 2019 Board of Directors to gather in front of the screen for a group photo, and ask that the chairs, the new chair and co-chair, chairs of the RC committee remain for a special orientation meeting after the AGM. And once again, thank you to everybody for attending.
Giving Mr. Collin as well.
Sure.
This 5 years.
No, this is, we're just making a photo of Ryan giving you our Sask Employer Award.
So one last thing, I'm giving Colin an award here. One of the things that, it's not on the agenda, but I'm going to mention it anyhow because it's something that we should be really proud of. The SCSA is getting recognition, or was given the award recognition of Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association for Saskatchewan's Top Employer Awards. So it's a huge accomplishment. It really shows the progress that's been made since Colin has taken the role as president of the SCSA. And you know, aside all that, Colin, you know, as chair, I appreciate the effort you put in. I know the time you're putting in. You know, and I know the amount of effort you're putting in, the hours after the hours that are going into it. You know, this represents, you know, how much time and effort he puts in, and not only that, but how hard the SCSA has worked to not just modern governance like we've attempted to improve within the board of directors, but modern management techniques within the association itself. So it's so well deserved.
That's cool. Thank you.
Janet, do you want me to?
Oh.
You're too hot.
Not too hot.
Yeah.
Too bright?
Wow.
Yeah.
Shiny.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. And then over there too. All right.
Over there. Thank you, everybody.